The courtroom fell silent as Judge Morrison leaned forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "And you expect me to take legal advice from someone like you?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension as he looked down at the black woman standing before him. The gallery gasped. But what happened next would make headlines across the nation and teach everyone in that room a lesson they would never forget. Let me take you back to a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. Margaret Williams sat in the gallery of courtroom 4B, dressed in a simple navy blazer and slacks. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried herself with quiet dignity. She wasn't supposed to be there that day. She had taken time off from her usual responsibilities to observe the proceedings of a civil rights case that had caught her attention. Judge Robert Morrison presided over the courtroom with an iron fist. A man in his early 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit, he had built a reputation over 20 years on the bench. Some called him tough. Others called him arrogant. But everyone knew he ran his courtroom exactly the way he wanted. The case before him involved a young, black man named David Chin, who was fighting wrongful termination. David's attorney, fresh out of law school, was doing her best, but Judge Morrison seemed determined to make things difficult. "Your Honor," the young attorney said, her voice shaking slightly, "preceding clearly shows that my client's case has merit. In the landmark decision of I know the law, Counselor," Morrison interrupted, waving his hand dismissively, "I don't need a lecture from someone who probably passed the bar last week." Margaret shifted in her seat, her jaw tightening. She had seen this before. Too many times. The hearing continued with Morrison shooting down every argument, every piece of evidence. When David himself tried to speak, the judge cut him off. "Mr. Chun, I suggest you let your attorney do the talking." Inadequate as that may be, that's when Margaret stood up. "Your Honor, if I may address the court," she said, her voice calm but clear. Morrison's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "My name is Margaret Williams. I'm an observer today, but I'm also an attorney, and I believe there's a significant procedural error occurring here." The judge's face turned red. "Sit down. You have no standing in this courtroom. Actually, Your Honor, any licensed attorney can address potential violations of due process when they witness them firsthand." Morrison stood up, his voice rising. "I will not be lectured in my own courtroom. Security, if this woman doesn't sit down immediately, the defendant has a right to speak on his own behalf." Margaret continued, her voice steady. "You've denied him that right 3 times in the last 10 minutes. You've also demonstrated clear bias against both the defendant and his counsel. These are grounds for mistrial." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Morrison's face went from red to purple. "And who do you think you are?" he shouted. "Some activist with a law degree? You come into my courtroom and expect me to take legal advice from someone like you?" The words hung in the air like poison. Margaret took a slow breath. She had 2 choices, walk away or stand her ground. She thought of every person who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or underestimated because of how they looked. "Someone like me," she repeated quietly. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a leather credential case. "Your Honor, allow me to properly introduce myself. I am Justice Margaret Williams of the United States Supreme Court. I was sworn in 3 months ago, and I came here today specifically because this case involves constitutional questions that may reach my court. I wanted to see firsthand how justice was being administered at the local level." The courtroom exploded. Morrison's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure horror. His clerk frantically pulled up something on her computer, her face going pale as she nodded confirmation to the judge. Margaret continued, her voice now carrying the full weight of her authority. "What I witnessed today is not justice. It's prejudice wearing a robe. You have violated this defendant's constitutional rights, shown contempt for his counsel, and demonstrated exactly why judicial oversight exists." She turned to David and his attorney. "Your motion for mistrial is granted, and I'll be recommending this case be moved to federal court where it can receive a fair hearing." Then she looked back at Morrison. As for you, Judge Morrison, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the Judicial Review Board. Your behavior today was unacceptable, and it ends now." Morrison collapsed into his chair, unable to speak. 3 months later, David Chin won his case in federal court. His young attorney gained confidence that would serve her throughout her career. And Judge Morrison? He announced his early retirement after the review boards. Investigation revealed a pattern of bias spanning years. But the real story wasn't about one judge's downfall. It was about Margaret Williams, who could have revealed her identity immediately but chose instead to experience what countless others experience every day, being judged by their appearance rather than their merit in an interview afterward. Justice Williams said something profound. Dignity isn't given by titles or positions. It's inherent in every human being. When we forget that, we forget the very foundation of justice. I didn't need to be a Supreme Court justice to deserve respect in that courtroom. I deserved it simply because I'm a human being. So does everyone else. Her words remind us that real change doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it comes from having the courage to stand up and speak truth. Even when everything tells you to stay silent. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Soul Relief Stories for more inspiring tales that remind us of our shared humanity. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you respond? Let's support each other in the comments. Until next time, remember, your worth is not determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself.